In the last tutorial, we added an array that contains the game board information, the number of stones in each bin, but we only added one of those to the actual printed game board. So let me start by adding the elements of the array to all of the 14 bins. So I'm just going to copy that code, and then within each bin I'm going to take away 2 spaces because our bin numbers will always take up 2 characters, and then adjust the indices. Now, because the line of code is going to become pretty long pretty quickly, let me actually put this onto separate lines. So perhaps in front of this plus sign, let me start a new line and tab that over just to kind of keep it organized. And since this will take a little while, let me actually pause the video and finish this, and we'll take a look at it in just a moment together. Well, let's take a look. So I added all the bin amount values to the lines that print the game board. So if we run the Python file, we should be able to see those numbers on the game board. And we do. We see 4s on the lower side for player 1, and 4s on the upper side for player 2, and 0s at the ends in the Mancala. So this is what the board will look like at the start of the game. Again, let me pull up the code and just take a look at this. So this middle line that includes the bin amount at index 13 and the bin amount at index 6, that's printing the middle line here with the 0s in the Mancala. The upper line prints the bin amounts for player 2 from index 7 to 12, and the lower line prints the bin amounts for player 1 with indexes from 0 to 5. And these are going counterclockwise around the game board from 0 up through index 13. So next up, let me define a new Boolean variable that indicates which player's turn it is. So I'll just call this player 1, and I'll set it to true initially. So player 1 will have the chance to go first. And now to indicate that in the game board, let me do the following. So if it's player 1's turn, I want a line to be printed under the game board that identifies the different bins that player 1 can choose from. So let me put an if command here, if player 1, so if that's true, it's player 1's turn. If that's the case, I want to print the following code. So I want to print some spaces along the bottom row to get to that first bin. So let me print across 6 spaces. Will take me under that first plus sign right here. And then I want to do 2 more spaces and print the character F. And then after 5 spaces, I want to print the character E. That should place an E under the second bin, under the next bin. 5 spaces again. And then a D, and so on. C, B, and A. So at this point, player 1 is always going to be true. So let me quit the game that's running by pressing Q in the terminal and try this new code. So I see my letters, but I recognize I'm a little off in my spacing. So I only wanted 4 spaces between each letter. So let me take one away and try this again. Of course, I want to quit the game first, the current version, and start the new code. So that looks a bit better, except at the very end. I want my letters, I should say, I want my letters to be right under the 4s to kind of have them nicely balanced. So this I actually want 1 space over. Okay, so that should be good for player 1. Now, if it's player 2's turn, player 2 chooses the bins on the upper side of the board, So I'd like those letters to be on the upper side of the board. So I can add an if statement above the board here if, this time using the command not, or the keyword not, to identify the opposite of player 1. So I don't need to create a player 2 variable. If it's player 2's turn, then player 1 will be false and not player 1 will be true. So in this case, ending my if command with a little colon there, inside the if statement, I want to print a similar line. 6 spaces takes me above the first plus sign. I want to go 2 more spaces, and this time I'll start with A, followed by 4 spaces, and B, and C, and so on. So to see this new code at work, let me go up to the player 1 variable and change that true value to false. So because player 1 is false, it means that it's player 2's turn. And so we should see a similar set of letters, but above the game board this time. So let me first quit the game that's running and rerun the code with false as the value for player 1. And we see the letters that identify the bins across the top of the game board. So in the next tutorial, we'll get the game board to go back and forth between player 1 and player 2 and enable the player to make a choice that affects the values on the game board.